In this video, I'm going to show you how easy it is to install in-vehicle charging for your BatBlock, which means you can charge your BatBlock while you're driving. Now, I'm going to show you every single step from selecting the right wiring to how to install it and how to choose the right fuse for your ignition wiring. Now, for a basic setup, you're going to need your battery and charging system. That's all covered by BatBlock, and you're going to need your wiring. You could use a 25 or 50 amp wiring kit. In this case, I'm using a 50 amp wiring kit, which gives you thicker wiring for more efficient charging. I'm also going to offer some expert tips throughout this video to take this setup to the next level, and there's a couple other bits and pieces you can use. So I'm adding a fuse adapter. This allows you to easily connect the ignition wire to an existing circuit. Along with this, you'll need a 3 amp fuse. If you're not using the ignition wire, you can skip this step. Plus some corrugated tubing and cable ties to keep everything neat and protected. The best thing about this install is that you only need basic hand tools, so some crimpers and a couple of spanners. You'll also need a test light or multimeter, and they're really handy. You can pick them up for under about $10 and you can use them for many more projects. Now, before we go any further, let's take a look at this vehicle here and I'll show you how to determine which fuse adapter you'll need. So let's take a look at that fuse box. Check your user manual to see where the fuse boxes are in your vehicle. It may also indicate the fuse type. If not, it's easy to check anyway. This Pajero Sport has a fuse box under the bonnet and one in the cabin under the glove box. Locate the fuse box that you want to use, remove the cover, and then remove a fuse to check what type and size it is so you can grab the correct piggyback adapter. Micro, mini, or standard. Now back to the installation. Let's take a look at that 50 amp wiring kit. You get 6 meters of red positive wire and 6 meters of black negative wire. At one end, there are ring terminals to connect to your vehicle's battery, plus a built-in fuse. This is a safety feature to protect your wiring. At the other end, you get terminals fitted that slot into a quick connect plug, plus a spare pair of terminals for both ends if you want to shorten the wires, a spare fuse, and a spare quick connect plug. The quick connect plug that's pre-fitted to the wiring kit can be plugged straight into the alternator input on BatBlock if you don't need that ignition wire. BatBlock also comes with a triple quick connect plug that allows the blue ignition wire and the wiring kit to be used with the one plug, but we'll get to that later. The first thing you're going to need to do is plan your cable route. There are generally 2 ways to do this. You can run your wiring under the vehicle and then find a rubber grommet at the back that allows you to poke that wiring up into the cab or the tub. Or you can go directly from the battery, find a rubber grommet on the firewall in the engine bay, and then run the wiring through the vehicle. So you're going to need to find that rubber grommet first so you can lay your wiring out. So after taking a look at this vehicle, I've decided to run the wiring underneath. I've located this grommet at the back so I know that I can run the wiring through here. Lay your wiring kit on the ground along the vehicle, roughly in the right place, and then make sure you remove the fuse here so everything's safe while you're working. So as well as the red and black wires that connect up to the battery, BatBlock also requires this blue wire if you have a modern vehicle with a smart charging system. And in any installation, we actually recommend installing this as well, just to improve charging. So lay this alongside the wiring as well, and we'll trim it to length. Now you'll see why I've run that blue wire along with the red and black. It's so we can plug all 3 wires into this single plug. Now here's a hot tip. When you're at this stage, grab your corrugated tubing. We're going to combine all these wires and run that all at one time to make it much easier to install. Trim off any excess corrugated tubing once you get to that fuse holder. Next, you'll need to feed the red, black, and blue wiring up into your engine bay and close to the battery and fuse box. Avoid any moving parts or anything that might get hot. Now that we've got those 3 wires into the engine bay, there's 2 main things we need to focus on. Connecting the red and black wires to our battery, and of course that fuse still isn't fitted. And then number 2 is to run this blue wire to a particular fuse in the fuse box that only has power when the vehicle is on, and we'll talk about that in a second. So to start with, let's connect this red wire to our positive terminal. Now with older vehicles, you can generally connect your black wire directly to the negative battery terminal, but on modern vehicles, they often have an electrical sensor here, as you can see, and that actually measures how much power is being used from the battery. So I need to connect this wire before the sensor so that any power the BatBlock is using is counted. So I'm going to connect the black wire to this body earth that's then connected through that sensor and onto the battery. Third, we've got this blue wire that we need to connect to our piggyback fuse adapter and to one of these fuses. So I'm actually going to run that from the underside of the fuse box. I've located a nice little hole here, and that means the lid of the fuse box will still fit perfectly. With the blue wire through, we're going to need to cut that to length, but first, we'll need to locate the correct fuse so we know how long this needs to be, and I'll show you how to do that next. So grab your multimeter or test light. You need to locate a fuse that doesn't have power while the vehicle is off, doesn't have power while the vehicle is on accessories, but does have power when the ignition is on or the engine is running. To do this with your test light, attach the clamp to the negative terminal of the battery. Then use the probe to press the small metal contacts on top of the fuses here. If the fuse has power, the test light will illuminate. With your multimeter, make sure it's set on DC voltage. Connect the black probe to your negative terminal, then use the red probe on the small contact on top of the fuse. If the fuse has power, the LCD display will show voltage, usually around 12 volts. Let's use this fuse here as an example to show you what you're looking for. With the vehicle off, it doesn't have power. Now, turning the vehicle to accessories, there's still no power. Finally, I turn the vehicle on, and now the fuse has power, meaning it satisfies the requirements. Perfect. Now you can turn the vehicle back off. Next, remove that selected fuse, as you'll need to connect the piggyback adapter in its place. This allows the existing fuse to work correctly and adds a new circuit that'll power that blue ignition wire. It's a good idea to avoid using any fuses linked to critical systems like brakes, and you can double check that by looking in your user manual. Refit the factory fuse that you took out to the bottom slot of the piggyback adapter here. Then leave the top slot empty for the moment until we've finished our install. Next up, all you've got to do is cut that blue wire to the right length, strip back the wires, and crimp it together. I'm adding a piece of heat shrink here as well to tidy it up and make sure it's a solid sealed connection. Now it's just a matter of routing the cable throughout the vehicle to suit your setup and keep it nice and neat. I've now run the wiring safely along the vehicle, and I've made sure to avoid anything that's moving, anything that's hot like the exhaust pipe, and I've tucked it up and out of the way so it's not going to get snagged on anything. I will go back through and actually cable tie it so it's all secure, but right now we're at the point where I can feed it through that grommet and back into the vehicle. So I'm going to have to take this plug off to make that happen. Carefully pierce a hole in the grommet so you can individually feed the wires through and keep a good tight seal. You can also add extra sealant here if required. Then pass the wiring up through the body until you have enough length, and then refit and reseal the grommet. And I'm going to add another piece of corrugated tubing inside the vehicle to continue that protection along the length of the wiring. In this case, we want to retain the use of the third row of seats, so we're going to go under this trim panel and feed it along the side here. Refit all the trim panels and double check the wiring runs neatly. How good is that? All the wiring is run, everything fits back in nice and neat, and we can still use that third row of seats. Final things to do, put that quick connect plug back on, go through and tidy up all the wiring and cable tie it in place, I'm also adding corrugated tubing to the positive wire directly at the positive terminal for extra protection, then adding a cable tie to secure it in place. And add those 2 fuses under the bonnet so we can give it a test. How good is that? If you want to charge your BatBlock while you're driving in your vehicle, it's that easy. A simple DIY that you could do in your driveway at home in a couple of hours. And it's all thanks to that plug and play design of the BatBlock.